So continuing our reductive strategy, now what we want to do is we want to reduce edges. So all of these together are going to make up one edge. So we're going to match these colors up. So the way that we translate this with this puzzle over here, we do it exactly the same way. There's no difference. So here's a red and blue. Let's start off with that. We'll find a red and blue right over here. Now make sure you don't get confused with the shades, because you may have a light blue and a red over here. You don't want to put the wrong one in. Now this is going to take a little bit more orienting correctly. You're going to know what you have to do. In other words, you can't just move this to here. Well, you can, but you won't get it down here. So it's got to come here or here, depending on where it's supposed to be. So just play with it a little bit and put it in the proper place. And it's going to be very apparent if you did it right or not. So if I move this here, does this belong over here? Well, I can move it down. And you can see that it does. If I put it upside down, you would know that it's wrong. So you can see that this one is not put in. So move it down so that it's here. Bump it out of the way. Just this actually. Bump it out of the way. Then turn it to move this edge in its place. And now move this back. And then get your center back. Now what I do is I continue with this piece where I left off. So I'm looking for the other red and blue right over here. So I'm just going to move this into place, and I just have to find where I think it's going to be. And you'll get faster and faster at it as your learning curve increases, so it becomes a little less and less cumbersome. Obviously it doesn't belong here. It belongs over here. So you can see that this belongs down here. So move it down, turn it out of the way, and I'll replace this into this slot. So turn this over here, and I'll move this new one in and move this back. So it's exactly the same thing. Let's do this one here because it's already in mostly. A light green and yellow. Now bear in mind this is yellow and dark green, so we don't want to get confused with that. So here's a green, and this is dark green and yellow over here. So this actually belongs here. So I would put this down like so, matches it up, bump it out of the way, turn this down, turn, and boy should I get an MF8 Gigaminx. Anyway, this is here. Now we'll find the other one. Actually, we'll find either one of these. Any green and any yellows together are welcome. Right here. So I'm just going to move this in at the proper place. Now, so too, if I don't want to disrupt this, I don't want this one to be on the top. So I'm going to put this one up here, move it down, turn, move this down to replace it, bring it across, and move it up. No need for algorithms with this, and now this is in. Now go ahead and do this until you reach the last two edges. I've already got a couple here that'll go. So do that until the last two edges. Okay, so here we are at what I think is the last two centers here. So you can see that all the edges are pretty much reduced, and we have blue and green, white and blue over here, and we have this over here. So we have these guys that need to be swapped. So how do we go about this? Well, let's use this as a model over here. So here, once again, we have the last two edges. Hope I didn't say centers, but edges. So to do this, what you're going to want to do is our first algorithm actually that has to do with one of reduction. This has the orange and yellow. This is orange and blue, orange and yellow, orange and blue. So the way that you want to do this is, what this algorithm is going to do is it's going to swap these two. So this will come here and this will come here. So what you want to do is coordinate it to where it's going to be the swap that you want. So this needs to come here and this needs to come here. So I'm going to assume that you don't know how to do 5x5 solves, but basically to review for those who do, if you need to move this to here or this to here, then the first step is to move it into the area that it's supposed to be. Now, you could have had it to where these two have to swap. If that happens, then you move it like this. So it really doesn't matter. If these two have to swap, then just move it across, slice it to where this joins where it's supposed to be. But if this were opposite, if this were flipped and this were flipped, and this had to swap with this, then just turn it this way. It really doesn't matter. But if it has to go like this, then turn it over here so that this is in front of you. If you have to turn it like this, then keep it over here. The whole point is that wherever you turn it into is to your right. So if you turned it into this, this is to your right. If you turn it like this, like we did, then move it to where this is at your right. Then do the algorithm R, Fi, U, Ri, F, and then make sure you turn it back. And what that'll do is that will swap these. Now, you may end up with a situation where maybe one is fine, but you have this situation. In this situation, you can see that they're where they need to be next to each other, but they're actually aligned wrong. These two have to swap. These two have to flip-flop. Now, if this were a 4x4 and I didn't have a middle one, I would think these two are perfectly fine, but they're actually not. And you can tell because it's not going to be coordinated with the rest of the puzzle. But if it were a 4x4, you'd continue to solve and you'd find a condition of parity. Here you won't, because this will always tell you that you shouldn't move on as you don't have the proper reduction. Now, according to the law of puzzles, which basically says you can only have an even number swap, if I see one like this, there must be at least another one, because you can't get a situation where you can only swap one without swapping another. So if you look, you'll find it, and there it is. Now, it could have been 2, it could have been 4, but there's always going to be another one. For this particular puzzle, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter whether it's 1, 2, or 3, but you're going to find that when we do this guy later on, and you have a similar situation where this is flipped, there has to be another one that's flipped, because the algorithm that I'm about to do is going to flip this back, but it also has effects on the center, which you don't know about and you don't care about because it's not a supercube, but you will with this one. So I'm just pointing that out now, and just to show you what the algorithm. And this is the infamous Red Bull algorithm, which is designed to flip-flop these guys. And that's going to be 2R, where this is R and this is L, 2B, 2U, and then L, because you're just doing these two here. Then 2 up, Ri, 2 up, R, 2 up, 2F, R, 2F, Li, 2B, 2R, and you'll see that it's fixed. And just go ahead and do the other one. R. Now once you get this, you have what you can call a fully reduced puzzle, which means all the centers are in, all the edges are lined up, so you've really converted this to a 3x3, and you solve it as such. Now how do I translate what I did to this guy? Well, the good news is the algorithm is exactly the same. It might appear to be a little skewed because here you can move this like this and this like this. With this you can't. You can move this over here, but these guys don't match up. That's the problem with these sides. But the good news with this puzzle is so far with the reduction process, there's absolutely no difference. What has to happen is that these guys need to swap. So I'm going to position them in such a way to where that can happen. So we'll move this across here, move this here, and then ask ourselves how this has to proceed. Well, let's see. This, I can't move it from here because it's going to be swapping with this. This has to be over here. So just kind of move it around a little bit until you have it in a configuration where you have the proper swapping that can happen. In this case, well, we're still not there yet, so there's no definitive way of doing it. Just kind of keep moving it around until you find yourself in the right configuration. So this is good. This green and purple needs to move here. This purple and white needs to move up over here. So it's really exactly the same configuration. So we're going to move this to here, like so, and exactly the same thing. You do R. Now notice in this particular time, I moved this to here. I didn't go here. If I moved it to here, I'd have to hold it over here, and this will be my F. But in this case, I moved it over here. So I keep the area that I moved into on my right and do R, Fi, U, Ri, F, and simply move it back. And so you got it. There it is over here. So it did flip these guys. Now we're going to look around, and it could have happened this way or maybe not, but as you look around you see these guys they're lined up with each other, but they're inappropriate. They're not right. If this were a Gigaminx, actually if this were a master Gigaminx, you wouldn't have this in here, but these two would be apparently in completely right and appropriate, but it really wouldn't be in conjunction with the rest of the puzzle, and you'd end up with parity. And I did show that in the master Gigaminx solve. But here we know that there's a problem. So how do I get out of this? How do I can I do exactly the same thing? Because the problem is my R's and my L's won't match up quite the same way. So my recommendation is to not do a variation of that algorithm. It's going to be too complicated, potentially, and a little bit messy. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do the same algorithm that we did before. We're not going to do the Red Bull algorithm. What we're going to do is a series of swaps of these guys. So I'm going to do the same R, FIU, RIF, because that translates directly from the cube to the Gigaminx. Now, if I were to do that, whichever one I move into, if I move this over to here, this one, you're going to get a swapping of this to here and this to here. But when this swaps to here and this comes up over here, what's actually going to happen is that this will stay the same, but this is going to flip. So these two will stay exactly the same. This center here won't change at all. These two won't change. But this will flip. So that this will come here, this will come here, but I'll end up with these two properly lined up. And then you can kind of predict what's going to happen next. So just arbitrarily do any one. I'm going to move this to the side over here, and then do R, FIU, RIF, and then bring it back. And as predicted, this flipped so that these two are now lined up, and notice these didn't change. So now it's really a question of setting it up to where I put one on the right side that's got to be flipped, and one that's on the left side that, well, doesn't need to be flipped. So that's how I'm going to do it. What I'll do is coordinate it to where this is on the left side, and we'll just kind of move it around and see how we're going to do it like this. Well, not like this, because I don't want to flip these two. What I want to do is I want to put this upside down. That's what I'm going to do, because I want these two to flip. So put this upside down. I'm not going to give you an algorithm to quickly flip that. I guess I could, but you can just kind of figure this out. That's part of the challenge of these puzzles. When to use an algorithm, which is like a tool, and when to just use your forethought, insight, and see if you can just flip things around just by positioning. So now these two are going to swap. These two are going to stay the same, so this will come in and be completely lined up. When this swaps over here, this middle one is going to flip so that it's going to join these two. So it's important to know all the effects of your algorithms in just such an occasion like this when you have to use it. So I'm going to move this over to here and then do R, FIU, RIF. And as promised, we'll move it back, and look at that, everything is fine. Now, could I have done the same thing here? Yeah, sure, you could do that. You don't have to red bullet. You could do exactly the same thing, and maybe that would be easier. It's just so much easier to do that Red Bull algorithm. But here there is no equivalent to the Red Bull, so there's no need to do it. Now what I have actually is just like I have a 5x5, I have a megaminx. And you can, at this point, stop and go ahead and solve it exactly like you would a megaminx. Just like you can solve this exactly like you would a 5x5. And I don't think it's too much to ask that you know how to do that before embarking on one of these guys. Megaminx solve with this, same kind of thing. We'll have the white one over here. It's just a little bit more searching around. So I move this up here, move this across, and you can see that it's lined up with the red. Again, this is all placement. Here's another white. Let's just find where the white's supposed to be, move it around. This is kind of our first layer, but the first layer is in a couple of different parts. This whole thing is going to be our first layer. This needs to be turned around over here, and this is just a matter of repositioning. This you can figure out. And if you can't, you can learn. All right, Move this white and green at its proper place. And same thing here. So what I'm doing is I'm basically doing a megaminx solve, but I'm doing it like a 3x3. In this case, I'm doing a gigaminx solve like a 5x5. And we've been able to see perfect homologies within each one. So this is the star. Instead of a cross, I guess we'll call it a star. But the corner placement is the same thing. So let's find a white one right over here. This belongs actually right over here. So put it right underneath where it's supposed to be. Same thing. R-I, D-I, R, D, R-I, D-I, R, D, R-I, D-I, R, D. So this is in. Now we got this one, we put this right underneath here and do the same thing. R-I, D-I, R, D. So go ahead and finish this first little mini layer over here before we move on. Okay, so this is all in. This is done the same way as a middle layer. This is like a proto middle layer over here. You line it up the same way. So we can find a red and blue, since it might be easy to find, right over here. So just line it up towards directly over the proper color. So you see this is over here. This needs to move over to here, and it's exactly the same algorithm. As long as you have the juxtaposition of these two sides, just like with the cube, there's no change in algorithm. So that's going to be UR, then reverse it, UIRI. Keep going counterclockwise, UIFI, then reverse it, UF. So now that's in. Now keep tracing all the way around here. In this case, red and green. Right over here. Turn this here. Now in this case, I can more easily position it over to here, so this is going to come across here, so to the left side. So we do UI LI, then reverse it, UL. Keep going clockwise, UF, then reverse it, UI FI. So now keep going all the way around here until you've filled in these proto middle layers here. Okay, so you can see that we've got all these middle layers in here. So this all constitutes, I guess, it's kind of like doing two cubes. This is you did a layer here, corners, and a middle layer. We're going to have to do the same thing over here, but in between these corners and a middle layer, you've got these guys over here. So this is how we're going to do something slightly different from the cube. We have to do this mediating layer over here. What I'd recommend is doing this. First off, put these edges in, and then we put the corners in. Corner is going to be the same algorithm, RIDI, but we have to set our RIDIs up so that we can do that. So what we want to do is here's the green and the blue, we want to move the green and the blue in. Now this top layer represents kind of something that gives us a lot of freedom. So if you ever wanted to move things without affecting anything that you did, move it to the top layer, then you can move it anywhere you want. For instance, here's a green and yellow is here. So I can move this over here and move this in. So now we're going to find the green and blue, right over here. So same concept here. Move this to the top. Now we're going to try to coordinate this coming down here in conjunction with this. So what I'll do is this turns here to match up with the green. We want to make sure we coordinate it with this over here. So this has to be to the right of this guy. So let's bump this out of the way. And then move this into this slot. So move this up to the top. 1, 2. Put it in its proper slot. And now you can move it down. 1, 2. Like that. Okay. So these are in. Now I have to get this center here, or this corner here. So look for the green, yellow, and blue here. Yeah, so this is it here. So same thing, just move it up to the top layer. Okay, so it's at the top layer here. Now once it's at the top layer, we need to coordinate it to where this needs to come into this slot. So what I'm going to do is once this is at the top layer, I'm going to turn it to where this corner here is going to be just above the corner that we want, and this is at the top layer. So move it like so. So now this is just below where it has to be. If it's just below where it has to be in the top layer, we can RIDI-RD it, get it in here without affecting anything else. So RIDI-RD. It just so happened we only had to do it once, but you can keep doing it until it goes back in. Once this is in, you just go, in this case, move it twice, and there it is. So now let's do another one, just for practice. Pink and red. Pink and red is right here. So what I can do is move it on the top layer, and as long as I'm not affecting these, I can move this down like so, and move this in. Just kind of get in the habit of reversing things that you did. Pink and blue, that's what I want next. Right over here. So I'll move this to the top layer. And now we just coordinate things. This pink and blue has to occupy this slot. So move this slot to the top. 1, 2. Move it into position, and just for the sake of orientation, you can move it down. Now find the pink, blue, and red corner. It's over here. Move it to the top. Now if this were in, if we didn't want to affect this, just move it to the top, bump it out of the way, and move it back. Now we have to put this just below where this is going to be on the top layer. So let's move this down, out of the way, out of this layer over here. And I'll move this in towards just above this, where this is actually just below where it's supposed to be here. 1, 2. And now we do RIDI-RD until this is properly placed. So we have RIDI-RD, RIDI-RD, and once more, RIDI-RD. Okay, you can see this is in place now, and just move it down. So now we've got this. So this is in, this is in. Now go ahead and keep doing that with all of the rest. Bearing in mind, this top can shuttle things around pretty easily, and this moves up to the top just below the corner that it's supposed to be. We've got a couple more to do. Okay, so having done that, that was the longest portion of it. So kind of just get your way through that. Next part is we're going to fill in these corners over here. So you put these edges in, these corners, and now these corners here. This is going to be the easiest part. So here we're looking for the blue, purple, and orange. It could be here, here, any one of these places. So let's see, blue, purple, and orange. Right over here. So again, it's a corner, so we know how to do corners. Put it just below where it's supposed to be. And just below it, this becomes the R, this becomes the D, so RIDI-RD. So you have that in. Now we do this one, orange, yellow, and green. Find it here, put it right below where it's supposed to be, and then RIDI-RD. And just keep doing that over and over again, RIDI-RD, until you get it in. Now pretty soon you don't have to stick with RIDI-RD. This is just in case you've not done this before. So there it is here. So now you have all these corners in over here, and now we just continue to follow suit. Now the rest of the megaminx solve is exactly like second and last layer of the cube, because that's really what you have left. You've got the middle layers here, and then you've got the top layers here. So we're now doing the same thing that we did way back over here, but now on this layer. So we can go ahead and find this, anything that's not silver in my case, will come here, this will come over to here. So this will be UR, and then UI, RI, UI, Fi, and then U, F. And through the magic of algorithms, there it is. Okay, so now all these are in. We just have the last layer. Now the last layer is going to once again parallel what happens with a cube, but with a dodecahedral twist. Now as you recall, to do the last layer, you're either going to have a dot where you just have the center, but none of these are flipped right, an L where two of the edges here are flipped right in the form of an L, or a line, or a cross. And that algorithm was FRURIUIFI. The important thing with this is it's going to be patterned after pretty much exactly the same thing. You're going to have either a dot, a quasi L, or a quasi line, but they're actually going to look different. So what this is going to be is, think of it this way. These two, just to the left and just to the back, are kind of fused together. If you think of it like that, then the situation is the same. So this is a situation of an L, where you have this and these two fused together. So basically this is like an L if you think of these as being together. So hold it over here so that you've got this over here, here, and here, where these are together and you have like an L. And do the same thing. F, R, U, R, I, UI, FI. And this is like a line because you have these two fused together and this over here. So this is like a line. Looks more like an arrow, but it is a line. And that's F, R, U, R, I, UI, FI. And sure enough, all these are rotated correctly. Now it's a question of orienting these. And again, quick review, that's the R, U, 2UR, it's the R, U, R, I, U, R, 2U, R, I. What that'll do is it holds this set of edges constant and rotate these guys around. Well, this will do the same thing, only we have to vary it a little bit. Because of the dodecahedron shape, the algorithm is changed to R, U, R, I, U, R, 3U, R, I. And when it does that, it's going to hold this constant, and it's going to hold another one constant also. It's going to hold this one exactly where it is. So just to show you if this is here, we're going to do this until we rotate the proper ones around. So I want the correct ones to be next to here. I'm looking for two that are next to each other that are, these two haven't moved rather. So I'm looking for two that are next to each other that are properly placed. So what I'm going to do is, let's say I want to put either the blue one here, which I can't if I keep doing this because this will stay fixed over here, or the pink one here, which again I can't because this is going to stay in this slot. But if I turn it like this will stay in this slot. But the rest is free to move. This will stay exactly where it is, but now the pink one is free to get into this slot over here. So when you have one that's surrounded by those that are not in, move it to the side, do the same algorithm, this will stay where it is, and do it until the correct one is in this one, so you have them both next to each other. So that's R, U, R, I, U, R, 2U, rather 3U, not 2, 3U, and RI. And there you have it. You have these two that are in. Now I'll point out that with a Gigaminx, you can potentially get a situation where you have 3 in and 2 out. You will not get that here, that's parity. And look at the Gigaminx tutorial to see how to get out of that. But in this case, you're always going to have a situation where you have 2 that are in and 3 that are out. Because it's a odd layered puzzle, so you do not get parity. So if I hold it here and keep doing that again, these 3 will eventually rotate in. R, U, R, I, U, R, 3U, 1, 2, 3, R, I, not yet, do it again, R, I, and there it is. So you've got all these back. Okay, now the next part is exactly the same as the cube. Look for the ones that are where they're supposed to be. So this is where it's supposed to be. And again, we're doing the same algorithm that we did with this to rotate the corners around, only the same thing is going to happen. This will stay the same, and this will stay the same. This will stay the same, and this will stay the same. this will stay the same, and this will stay the same. But every time you have a u, you're going to have to do a 2u instead. So you always have to add another u when you translate algorithms from cube to dodecahedrons. So let me show you what I mean. This stays exactly where it is. So we're going to go, now I have to redefine my 2u's. So it's either going to be 2u or 2ui. Here it was just 2u, but here I have to specify that because 2u does not take me all the way across. So it's going to be 2u r, 2ui li, 2u ri, 2ui l. So that's how you variate it to do the same thing, but changing things around. So this is where it needs to be, and this is where it needs to be. Now these guys are going to rotate around. So all I have to do is hold it over here so that this will stay fixed and this will stay fixed, and the rest of these will rotate around. So once again, and lo and behold, everything is in the proper slots, but maybe not rotated. Now the next part is equally easy. So bear in mind, by variating the algorithm, we change what's going to stay in place. Hold the ones that are not where they're supposed to be to the right, and just RD them exactly the same way, only we just have more corners to put in. So RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D. This is now in, so move it here. Now remember to finish with that D. Don't scrimp on the D's. Same thing, RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D. All right, with every 2, you put everything back in. So now this one, and you're almost there. RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D. You know the words, sing along. RI, DI, R, D. And the last one here, and this one is quick. RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D, and then you put this in, and you have finally, at long last, solved your Gigaminx. Simple, non-super cube type puzzle. Solve of this where you basically pattern it after first 5-layer puzzle, just like the cube, reduce everything with those slight differences, and then you do your regular megaminx algorithms, which are really just variations of the cube algorithms. So that's it for this. Hope that helped. You can refer to the megaminx or the hexaminx algorithms tutorials rather to help guide you through things that I might have glossed over with this one. And next, I'm going to use a puzzle I'm going to move on to something that's a lot easier to move, like Stonehenge. Anyway, thanks for watching.